Hello everyone, welcome to Physiques Games. In this video we're going to review my first ever game jam. Before we get started though, I want to ask you guys, have you ever heard about game jams or have you ever participated in one? Let me know in the comments below. First we will cover what a game jam is, then we will go over why I participated in one and how it went, and finally we will do a short post-mortem. First up, what is a game jam? A game jam is a contest where teams or individuals create a video game from scratch based around a given theme, and after that they will review other submissions and leave their ratings and their feedback. Each jam has some time constraint on it and sometimes a limit on how many team members you can have. The end goal is to make a game that is fun, engaging, and interesting. So there are hundreds of these game jams out there, each one having different themes, different time constraints, different judging criteria, different people participating, you name it. And as you can see here, thousands and thousands of these games are created and submitted all the time. So with all that being said, what made me want to join a game jam anyway? First of all, I want to give a big shout out to several YouTubers who showed me that these things exist, as well as got me interested in joining them. Danny, J Brills, Game Maker's Toolkit, and of course, the great Brackies, CEO of Brackies. So what is it about these jams that made me want to try them out? There are several reasons, but here are some of the main ones. First up, change. I wanted to try something new. I've made several smaller prototype games on my own with Unity, but never really made anything polished or put anything out there. Nothing with a ton of effort behind it, just kind of like, hey, you know, that would be kind of fun. Played it a little myself, showed some friends, that's about it. This jam was a way for me to change those things up, try to make something a little more polished, create something different from what I usually do, and really put it out there and see what people think. Next up is challenge. Game jams are a great way to take you out of your element. It's a huge shift from working on something like a personal project where you have no deadlines, you can set your own schedule, all that. The quick deadline of the jam is very key to me. Without it, I could easily have just said like, I'll work on it tomorrow or maybe next week. But now with a deadline to meet and with teammates to support, it really keeps you focused, on task, and working on it. In addition to challenge, working with the teammates gives you collaboration. It's a great way to meet other people who are interested in gaming and game development. For my first jam here, I ended up joining the weekly game jam, which hosts a new game jam every single week. They are, at the time of this video, on their 174th week of hosting game jams, which is absolutely insane to me. That's over 3 entire years worth of game jams. With that many jams under their belts, they have tons of experienced people in their community looking to collaborate and meet new people. This lets you create something much better than you could create alone, as 2 heads are always better than 1. Learning. Game jams will keep you on your toes. Depending on your team and the theme for that particular jam, you could be working on any type of game, and it could be something you've never considered working on before. This is great for learning new skills and staying interested in development. If you feel like you're stuck working on a personal project or you've lost interest in something like game development recently, I think trying something new in these game jams and getting your head out of that stuck space gives you a great area to make mistakes with no consequences and to reinvigorate your passion. And finally, of course, fun. I joined to have a great time, meet some new people, share some laughs, work together on something we're passionate about, and just overall have a great time. So let's talk a little bit about how that first game jam went. Day 0, theme announcement day is here, and it looks like we're going to be jamming around the theme of catapult. It seems like an interesting topic. I've got a few ideas brewing around, so let's hope we can come up with something fun and get the creative juices going. So here's the end of our brainstorming session where we all pitched a ton of ideas and then slowly chipped away at them, trying to figure out which ones are doable, which ones would be fun, which ones are interesting, that kind of stuff. So we wanted to keep things very simple and make sure we could actually finish something, but you also want to pick a fun idea. In the end, our top choices were a Space Invader style game, where you would control a catapult clearing waves that are coming down towards you. A Peggle ripoff, where you essentially just play Peggle, but you launch your ball into the bricks with a catapult instead of that little thing at the top of the screen. And a tower defense style game, where you can either control placements of towers to destroy incoming catapults, or you can play as the enemy where you're sending in waves of units to defeat defending catapults. In the end, we decided that the tower defense would be our best bet, as it seemed quite simple and they're all very fun. Next day, I realized I never really worked with 2D games in Unity, so I wanted to mock up a few things, and I drew up these amazing tower and unit temporary art pieces and placed them on a big green plane. Looks great. I got the unit to move slowly to the right and then teleport back and just keep doing it and put these towers in its way. I started working on getting the towers to trigger when units cross over their range, which didn't seem to work for some reason until I realized that Unity has separate events for on-trigger enter and on-trigger enter 2D. Like, come on, why? Why would you do that? But in the end, with it working, I felt pretty accomplished. There's no firing or damage done or anything, but with the trigger working, it should be, pretty simple to just place some kind of fire function in there, right? I mean, that's kind of what I was hoping. So from there, I went ahead and set up a GitHub repository for us, put all these files up there as a starting point, but actually found out that both of the other teammates were interested in using Unity Collab, so I went ahead and deleted that and we switched over. I had never used Unity Collab, so I was pretty interested in seeing how it works and how it compares to using Git. And I wanted to flesh out some more of the programming ideas after that, so I worked a little bit on what these classes would look like, how they would send data between each other. And I remembered seeing something recently about scriptable objects in Unity and how they can be used for things just like this, so I decided I was going to do some research. But this was kind of late in the day, so I figured I'll start that tomorrow. So on the next day, I start watching some tutorials, and of course I start by watching our great Lord and Savior Brackeys. He had an excellent video on scriptable objects that covers the basics of how they work and a bit about what you can use them for. After that, I continued to watch some more tutorials to try to figure out some best practices for scriptable objects, and I think the Game Jam was a great time for me to try to learn these new skills, but at the same time I'm realizing trying to do a big paradigm shift like this definitely cost me a lot of time for development. Later that day, on a walk with my dog that he didn't really seem to be enjoying, I had the big brain blast idea of making something similar to Enter the Breach, which is a puzzle game where you're trying to save or protect your city under siege, and I thought it would fit in great with the theme. Say like a bunch of catapults have rolled up to your castle and you got to control your army to try to save your people. Not to mention, I think that the isometric art looks gorgeous. So I mentioned this at another quick brainstorm session with the team and they very much liked the idea. But we all decided it was going to be too hard to complete with our week-long deadline. So instead, we just took the isometric art idea and decided to create a two-sided tower defense. You face off against the CPU, both placing towers and sending units at each other, with the catch being that because of the moat around each castle, the only units that can damage each other's castle are catapults. So I continued working on this with some temporary art and switched over to an isometric viewpoint. On the next day, I worked a little bit on the UI for the game. This is an area I personally find to be quite hard. I don't really know how to make the UI intuitive, but also not be verbose or boring. I figured that's something to get done later as a polishing task, and for now I just slapped some big gray buttons on them and called them good. I added in some passive gold income and got the buttons, quote, working, where you spend your money and a nice little square pops up for you, and it just sits there. You really don't be moving though. The next day, I only got a bit of time left before the end of the jam, and we currently have approximately 0 gameplay. To fix that, I figured the next step would be getting spawned units to move towards enemy defenses. So I started looking at some more tutorials about the Unity nav mesh system, and it seems that it really only works for 3D games. I was trying to slap some 3D objects underneath our 2D map and try to use that, but it was a bit of a flop. So then I looked at some more Brackeys videos using A-starred pathfinding and nabbed the free library that he linked to. And this sort of worked, but I was still struggling on getting obstacle avoidance working. Originally, we planned on having a river between the two players' castles with one bridge as a choke point that every unit would have to pass over. Instead, we just yeeted that on out of there and said, hey, units can walk across the river, why not? And unfortunately, Brenz was quite busy with other things and had to drop out of our game jam, so now we're left without an artist and only a short amount of time left. And currently, towers look like a square with the word tower on them, and units look like a square with the word unit on them, so that's great. The next day, I continued working on some A-starred pathfinding. It was doing a little better, still no tower spawns, but units will move towards enemy castles after spawning, and they'll stop when they reach their attack range. Dane made some pixel art for each unit and tile type, so the game looked a little bit better. Still wasn't a whole lot of gameplay yet, but we're working on it. Units will stop and fight enemy units when they're in range of each other, so there's a little bit more there. Unfortunately, this is kind of where the game ends up. A tower defense game with no towers and no real enemy to play against. So it's not really the most exciting version of a tower defense game, huh? So in the end, how did it go? Well, we failed and it went great. Failing at it helped us learn a ton. Not to mention it gave us a great chance to review what changes we can make so that future game jams go better for us. At the end of the game jam, we discussed what we could have done to make things go smoother and how we plan to work on them in the future. Our brief post-mortem ended up looking a little bit like this. The first most important thing was communicate, communicate, communicate. If you're having issues with your portion of the jam, let your team know right away. The earlier they can help you, or the earlier you can shift your goal to something more achievable, the better with these short deadlines. Similarly, make sure you have a to-do list that is based on priority. Looking over my development choices, I realized I should really have worked on things in a much different order. Like, instead of working on getting the UI and sound to work together or look nice, I should have created a tower placement system and got A-Start Pathfinding to work with them. It would have been a much better game. Finally, we needed to remember to keep things simple. The isometric viewpoint and two-player tower defense both sound awesome and would make for a really fun game. But they were both more difficult to develop than a single-player, non-isometric viewpoint game. Those things could have saved us a ton of time and headache in the long run. Overall, I had a great time with my first game jam, and I am looking forward to continuing to do them in the future. It was great to work with a team of people who are also interested in game development. It was great to try something new, and it really helped push my boundaries. I would highly recommend that you dive into them. If you've watched to the end here, I really want to say I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Please leave a comment below with any feedback that you might have. I'm really trying to improve these videos each time I make one, and I would love to hear what you think of them. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.